Just a second. 9:00 a.m. I want to welcome the members of the committee back again. You have before you a very brief agenda. Primary purpose today is review the staff budget recommendation and adopt the 2025 general fund revenue estimate.
Capital expense funds and ARPA.
That doesn't make any sense though.
Yeah.
One moment, please. What does this mean though?
Increase of capital expense, one-time money. And ARPA.
And this is the increase though.
What's your name? General fund, state
Okay.
support.
How about you? 15. Okay, thank you, Tony. Primary goal today is review the staff budget recommendation, adopt the 2025 general fund estimate. The governor will be here around 11 o'clock. Then we'll return December the 6th at 9 to publicly adopt and release the 25 joint legislative budget. Before we begin that process, we need to handle a few items. First item of business is the per diem and expenses for today's meeting.
Make
Here,
a motion, we approve.
motion by Senator Hobson, second.
Second.
Second by Representative White. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The ayes have it. Seeing no objection, the per diem expenses are hereby approved. Second item of business to approve the minutes of September 29th, which is our last budget hearing for FY 2025. Here, a motion to approve the minutes.
So moved.
Now, here, second.
Second.
Approved and seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The ayes have it. No objection. At this time, we'll take a short recess to allow the public to exit the room. Look at them run. And then the committee will convene in an executive session to proceed its work. If you're not a joint legislative committee member or committee staff member, you actually exit the room now. Seeing that has been accomplished, the committee will resolve itself into executive session. And we go forward Back in session. Legislative Budget Office. We have before us the state economist is on the agenda for y'all, and we'll recognize Mr. Corey Miller. And Mr. Miller, you presented some of your information. I have the latest one of these. If you've got a presentation, the ladies will make a copy, but we would appreciate a summary and allow the members of the committee to ask any questions they may have.
Okay.
So we'll start with a summary from Mr. Miller of his position.
Yes, sir. The Revenue Estimating Group recommends that the fiscal year 2024 general fund estimate be changed to $7,641,600,000. That figure represents a decrease of 0.7% over the actual fiscal 2023. General fund recommendation is an increase of 1.6% or $117,800,000 from the fiscal year 2024 Sinai estimate. The recommendation from the Revenue Estimating Group for the fiscal year 2025 general fund estimate is $7,637,100,000, a decrease of 0.1% or $4,500,000 below our revised fiscal 2024 general fund estimate. Just to quick summarize, U.S. Mississippi economies are expected to slow in calendar years 24 and 25 as financial conditions tighten and labor markets loosen. This slower economic growth, combined with effects of additional decreases in individual income tax rates, should also lead to a slowdown in general fund revenue growth in the current and following fiscal years. And based on this assessment and other factors, the Revenue Estimating Group recommends these estimates to the committee for fiscal years 2024 and 2025. Be glad to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Miller. Now, we have your Mississippi Business proposal here, and they're
Okay.
making copies of your presentation. I appreciate your coming today. I did note in your Mississippi Business for November, and you've repeated here just now, that the United States and Mississippi economies are projected to begin slowing in the fourth quarter. That would
Yes,
be
sir.
that'd be this quarter. Is that
Yes,
correct?
sir.
Do you anticipate them slowing in the first two quarters of the next year?
They will be slower than we've seen in the third quarter. We had a very strong third quarter, both state and nationally, and yes, they will be somewhat slower in the first half of next year.
Of next year. So that would be the first and the second quarter of next year you anticipate slowing as well.
Yes, sir.
And then, of course, what we're working on is the 25 budget, which would be in the third, fourth, and first, second quarter of 25. Do you anticipate slowing continuing at that time?
About 1.4% growth in the U.S. economy in that next 2 years, actually. And Mississippi economy, we still think it will be around 1%, 1.1% or so over that time period. So it would be slower than we've seen this year.
Okay. And you mentioned in here about a recession. Of course, that's an R word, and you mentioned that you're not sure that a recession is expected, but you're anticipating this slowing.
Right.
And so, do you anticipate a recession in the 2025 year, sir?
No, sir, do not at this time.
Okay, so you anticipate less funds being available for a number of reasons, including taxes, right? Tax cuts,
Right.
but also a slowing of the economy from prior years, but not necessarily a recession
No, sir.
within the normal historical definition.
Right.
Okay. Okay, Speaker. Mr. Reed, Kim, Scott, or Percy, anyone? Questions? Yes, sir. Senator Filgate?
Hey, Governor, what about the interest rates? It seems as though the Fed has basically decided they have stopped raising the rates, but do you anticipate into the next year, and then Chairman Powell hasn't committed to not raising them further if the need arises, do you foresee any meaningful change in the prime lending rate?
Now, the market yesterday was very excited about the inflation print, and the market always wants to see interest rates come down as soon as possible. But based on what Chairman Powell has said, I think the Fed is very leery of bringing down those rates too soon. Based on what's happened going back to the 1970s, they would probably want to err on the side of holding up for too long rather than cutting too quickly. That said, our estimates are that it would be the middle of next year, say June, July 2024, before they started cutting. And then that would be a gradual cut in rates. And if they're able to continue to do that, it would be probably a year or two, they would try to get down to a range of around 2.5%, which they think is neither restrictive nor stimulative. Obviously, right now with a rate of 5.25% to 5.5% for the federal funds rate, that's considered restrictive policy. But I do think they would probably err on the side of keeping rates higher for longer.
We're seeing that reflected in house sales. Our realtors tell us that house sales are either going to cash or going down in a number, which is a reflective of the interest rate. And if that doesn't change for the next year, we'd anticipate that'd be the same.
Yes.
So that cuts back our residential builders and also our small commercial builders. All right, questions? Any other questions? Senator Boyd? Mr. Miller, we appreciate very much your assistance today. I think we got the governor should be here in about a minute or two if he's not here already. And so if there are no further questions, we'll thank Mr. Miller for coming and we'll adjourn subject to recess subject to call, and we should be about 2 to 3 minutes, I think. All in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. We're
Governor and Mr. Speaker, and to members of the committee for this meeting. And I understand that the state economist spoke quite a few minutes ago, and I appreciate the work that the Revenue Estimating Group does. He, as always, represents the experts in the field of finance that we have in the state, the Legislative Budget Office, the Department of Finance Administration, the Department of Revenue. And so with that, I have seen the number that he has provided and am comfortable with that number. So thank you.
Thank you. Anything else, Governor? Thank you, Governor. Thank you, Governor, very much for coming today. We did have a presentation before you arrived from Corey. And in his November statement, he indicated that the economy was slowing during the last quarter, and we asked him during his questions before he came, did he anticipate it slowing this next 2 quarters? He agreed that it did, proposed that it did, and then the more important one was in 2025. And so he also indicated that there would be a slowing there depending on what happens with the interest rates. And we had discussed before you came the fact that we had 2 months in which we were below estimates for revenue. And so at that particular point in time, we started discussing, Governor, maintaining the actual proposed amount as it was for last year, for which came to $7,523,080,000. So that brings you up to date on where we were. Are there any discussions about that? We had some discussions, Governor, before you came in. Any discussions on the $7,523,800,000? Any discussions from committee?
Just so this is not, I don't think this is the sheet that the Revenue Estimating Group produced. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So this number is not congruent with what the Revenue Estimating Group recommended.
That is correct.
And why is it not the same as what the Revenue Estimating Group recommended?
We just went over that. The 2 things that happened was we have a slowing. We missed 2 months. We have a slowing of the economy as proposed by the state economists and also by general feeling of some members of the committee in talking to residential builders and other contractors. Then he has testified we have a slowing for the next 2 quarters and for the next 2025 year while we're here. So the general discussion before you came, although we've not taken a vote on this, Governor, the general discussion was that we anticipated the state economist was correct in the slowing and that we did not want to overestimate the amount of money that was coming forward. So we have, by general consensus before you arrived, discussed keeping the same amount as we had last year as a projection for the 2025 year. As you know, that could change. Will change up or down every year that you've been here. So it could change again. But we were leery of projecting an increase of $113 million, knowing the last 2 out of the last 4 quarters were negative, months were negative, and further, that the testimony and the practical work that we've done around here has shown that we may not be, that may be aggressive, and we were concerned about making sure it was realistic. Now, that's a summary, but anyone else is welcome to add.
I would be curious to know your concerns with that.
Well, I guess I'm kind of caught off guard because I didn't anticipate there would be a change. As everyone knows, the only role the governor has in the revenue estimate is in the fall, not in the spring. And therefore, I was prepared to come in and agree to the estimate as it was produced by the experts. For those of us who, for instance, are very interested in cutting taxes in this legislative session, arbitrarily lowering the number for no apparent reason hurts our ability to justify those tax cuts. I'm a very strong proponent of cutting taxes in this legislative session. I'm going to be regardless of what this number is, but I don't see any justification for telling the head of the Department of Revenue, the head of the Department of Finance Administration, the state economist, and the head of the Joint Legislative Budget Committee, who recognized a slowdown in their number, that they're wrong and arbitrarily lowering the number by a couple $100 million, which makes tax cuts harder to get across the finish line. It doesn't make any sense whatsoever to me. And so for me, which the law, believe, provides for the governor to, for there to be a revenue estimate, the governor has to agree to it. And I don't see any justification for lowering the number at this time.
Well, as you know, Governor, the difference, the amount you're talking about tax decreases, which we have done in prior years, as you know, the difference between the budget and the estimate is where they come from. So this, by having what we consider to be a realistic approach to it, regardless of the proposals, that still leaves significant amount of funds available for tax relief or anything, education or whatever else. So it's not like our budget, our initial budget is in the six whatever million. I believe it's still probably a $600 or $700 million possibility, which would either matriculate as we get further into March when we do that or not. President White?
I was just going to say, and I think the governor would probably, he doesn't have to agree with me on this, but I would simply say, I have never cared what our state economist thought about what our money was going to be. If we had listened to him, we wouldn't have tax cuts that we have now. So
I would like to disagree with you on that, but I just can't do it.
yeah. So, and I don't know how much input he had into the figure that they end up coming with as a recommendation. I would just say, for what it's worth, most of the people around this table have shown an ability and fortitude to not only draft legislation, but to corral the votes and get it passed for major tax cuts. And I think that is the aim of the majority of the people around this table going forward. Whether or not the state economists believe we're at 650 or whatever figure he wants to put on any of that stuff. So, you know, my colleagues here seem to think that there is a little bit of a slowdown. They're hesitant to jump up another $100 and something million and want to stay with their original, where we left it at sine die, this estimate. For my part of it, I'm trying to work in good faith with them because I anticipate the House will probably be back with an income tax cut plan in the very near future. And so I'm trying to be a team player all the way around for whatever that's worth. I think we're squabbling over 100 million some odd dollars. What's the amount?
130.
Yeah. With it and where you're coming from. The speaker and I were talking. I said, well, I can tell you what the governor's frustration is. He's looking at tax cuts, same as you and I are. And it does from a selling standpoint. And I don't want to not include you in the tax cuts we've already done, because if you had not got involved, we probably would not have gotten the tax cuts we got a couple of years ago. So I want to commend you for that. And certainly any future tax cuts we have will require your help to get it across the finish line. So I want to acknowledge that publicly. But I also want to say, I think the group as a whole felt we were being a little bit aggressive in light of just what the numbers are on paper, whether or not Corey Miller thinks they're a slowdown or not. There is a slight downtick, and this was simply an acknowledgement of that. As I don't know if that's a fair statement. That's my feelings on it. Y'all may feel different about it.
Anybody else? Speaker?
I think everybody knows my feeling on tax cuts, and we have fought aggressively for that over the last 3 or 4 years. I'm not going to be here next session to be involved with that, but I do want to make sure we are positioned as well as we can be to make that happen, to continue that effort. We fought for an elimination 2 years ago, and I think there's still room. And of course, we didn't get there. We got the largest tax cut ever, but we didn't get all the way. I'd like to see that continue. So to the extent that whatever we do here makes that possible, I think we need to, I'd like to do that. I'd like to make sure that whatever we do continues the effort to cut taxes.
The real number, Governor, in my opinion, But we too, at the Senate, obviously, were joined in that, in the tax cut part. And we have income taxes and grocery taxes that will be on the agenda, I'm sure, this year. But to me, the real number is the budget number, not this projected number. It's the budget we adopt and the gap in the amount of money that comes in. It's not necessarily this particular one. And this, in my own personal opinion, I have to echo both the speaker and Jason, this does not preclude by any stretch of the imagination further taxpayer relief, and in fact probably encourages it.
Well, I would just simply say, look, if Governor Husband, if you can say today that you anticipate there will be an income tax cut that comes out of the Senate and the legislature in 2024, I'm more than willing to agree to the number as it comes, because it seems, what I'm hearing is there's general consensus that income taxes ought to be cut. And so if you can go on the record, then I think I could probably agree to this number. And I would just tell you that we're going to, in the executive budget recommendation, because really this number only applies to the EBR. And I can tell you, we're not going to increase spending in the EBR. We're going to propose income tax cuts in the EBR. And so if you can go on record saying that you anticipate there'll be an income tax cut that comes out of the Senate, then I can probably agree to this number.
Yeah, we are anticipating there will be tax relief this year. Now, whether that's grocery tax, income tax, or other taxes, I can't tell you that, because as you well know, having been in this position, I don't vote. They all vote. So whether I say it or not wouldn't make that much difference. Whether they say it or not would make a big difference. But we have a history, and we have positioned ourselves. Again, I didn't vote on it, but the members of the legislature have in the last 4 years have positioned Mississippi for the best financial condition it's ever been in. They've devoted more money to education, more money to tax cuts, more money to infrastructure than ever. So rather than talk about what we may do in the future, it's clear to me what the appetite for the last 4 years is, and most everybody in this room got reelected, including the governor. So I doubt very seriously things are going to change in regards to tax relief, continuing tax relief.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
I just want to make sure, could you confirm, we talked about this briefly earlier, but it didn't go into any detail, but I just want to make sure I'm right on this number, that through October, which is 1/3 of the current fiscal year, we are actually approximately 50 million, maybe a little north of that, 50 million up from this FY24 signing die estimate in collections. Is that right?
That's correct. And we discussed before you came, Governor, the fact that about 29 million of that is interest income that we had not anticipated, because we were getting about 3.2% in our interest money, and a lot of our ARP money and stuff have not been spent yet. So I think the real number in there is closer to about 20 million. When you take out just the interest,
Above the estimate.
which is pretty close. 2 months below and 2 months above.
Governor, thank you, Governor, Mr. Chairman. I care a lot more about the number in March or April than I do today, frankly, and we put this number out there, and it's certainly an important number, but it's not nearly as important as what we look at when we get towards the end of the session, when we adopt the budget. So if there's no further discussion, my motion would be to adopt the FY 2025 general fund revenue estimate of $7,523,800,000, which is the same as the FY 24 signing die estimate.
Is there a second to the motion?
I'll second.
Discussion.
The statute requires that the governor agrees with the estimate. The governor will not agree with this estimate. I guess you can pass it if you want to, but you're in violation of the statute if, in fact, that is the case. The only budget that is affected by this number is the executive budget recommendation. And I understand that you only are focused on March. And by the way, it doesn't matter what the number is anyway. You can appropriate versus any number you want to. But the governor has the executive branch, which we still have 3 branches of government. The executive branch has to budget off of this number. And so I'm not going to agree to the number as it is currently written. So because I don't see any justification for doing so. If there was a reason to say the Department of Finance Administration doesn't know what they're doing, there was a reason to say the Department of Revenue doesn't know what they're doing, there was a reason to say that the Legislative Budget Office, which is one of 5 members of the Revenue Estimating Group, doesn't know what they're doing, then I'm willing to and open to it. But just to do it arbitrarily, just to lower the number so as to minimize the likelihood of tax cuts in the session is not, in my opinion, the right approach. So I'm not going to agree to it. If I don't agree to it, I don't think we have a revenue estimate, and so I don't think we can go forward. But that's, I guess, neither here nor there.
When's it due?
The governor's November 15th,
So it's due.
today.
So this is a day we have to work it out.
I think that's right.
The budget is due January 31 in an election year. So it's not due until the 31st of January. I think it's November 15th in the other 3 years.
So in this particular instance, then, we have a motion in which the governor's not agreed to. We have a motion and a second, the governor's not agreed to that. So, I guess the first thing to do is to, whether we adopt the motion. If it fails, then we're back to ground zero. If we adopt the motion, then we'll have to sit down and work with you to get a budget. Is that correct?
I think we're in uncharted territory. I served 8 years on the Revenue Estimating Group. I served with Dr. Phil Pepper. Dr. Pepper was the state economist for a while when I was there, so I've been around a while, and I don't recall this ever coming up. Maybe I don't recall the committee not adopting at this particular fall meeting. So.
We've got one coming in December too, Governor, December the 6th. So I guess we can revisit it at that time on the 6th, knowing your position at this point. So we have a motion on the table and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed?
I'm opposed.
One opposed. So motion carries. We will get back with the governor and his staff by December the 6th. So we've got till January when we have our second meeting and see if we can either satisfy your concerns about this, Governor, or whatever, till we get to a better point. All right, any other things that come? Governor, you have anything else to add to the group on economics or anything?
Nope.
All right, then, seeing no, we'll stand. I've got all my motions here. Stand for. We're scheduled to meet on December the 6th, 9 a.m. to adopt the final fiscal year budget recommendation. Hear a motion to adjourn the meeting. All in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? No, the ayes have it.